Hey gentlefolk, my name is Malte Krug. Welcome back to another episode of All About Keys. This is the second episode dealing with my journey with the German Keyboard Magazin. For an introduction what this series is about and how this magazine influenced myself as a keyboard player and a synthesizer lover, just check out this video up here. In today's episode, there will be a brief description of this month's issue of the magazine itself, and one machine will be shown in detail and in the flesh. This time, it's not taken from one of the tests in the magazine, but from an advert on the back cover. My collection is large, but this time it doesn't cover any of the tested gear. That'll change from next month onwards. You read the title of this video, so I guess you already know which unit I will lay hands on. If you're only interested in the gear and its sounds, just go to this point in the video. And now, let's check out the magazine. As usual, they are hitting us with a content list first, followed by the letters to the editor. And in the news section, there are some things worth being pointed out. And I don't mean the bright red background color. Here, they're mentioning for the first time a new cheap sampler from Ensoniq, without actually giving us the name. And the Lin 9000 drum machine / sequencer, which wasn't as successful as its ancestors, the Lindrum and the LM1, but it could be seen as the forefather of the later MPC series of sampled drum machines made by Akai, for which in the beginning Roger Lin was responsible for as well. There's a feature about Reinhold Heil, who used to be the keyboard player of a German rock band called Spliff, which was really big here in the early 80s, and I still listen to their music once in a while. In the interview he says that he's trimmed down his live setup to a Fairlight and the Yamaha DX1, two machines of which we could only dream about to ever put hands on. He also produced a few major German artists then, like Nena. He's living in the US for quite a while now and has his foothold in movie soundtracks production. And this is Oskar Sala. And if you were ever curious who did the weird sounds in Alfred Hitchcock's The Birds and how he did it, this is the guy using his Trautonium. You can still see one of these at the Deutsches Museum in Munich, among other synthesizer classics. And here they introduce another staple of the magazine, the monthly giveaway, which was randomly given to somebody who subscribed or sent in an idea to better the magazine. In 1993 I was lucky enough to actually win one of those giveaways. And here they tested the Kurzweil 250, which I mentioned briefly in the last episode. I never saw one in the wild, but the famous samples from this machine were also used in the early versions of the Kurzweil K2000, almost 10 years later, and they still sound great. The Roland MKB-1000, one of the earliest MIDI master keyboards. It has the same keybed as the famous RD-1000 stage piano, but no internal sound source. Roland embraced the MIDI concept in their program pretty thoroughly and from early on. They made rack versions of a lot of instruments to be played and managed via MIDI by a master keyboard, like this one. And due to the nature of MIDI, you don't have to stick to a certain brand, you can mix units from various companies. Along with features about explaining MIDI basics, which was still pretty new at the beginning of '85, they were always keen to explain new technology to their readers, which might become important for the audio world in the future. Here it's about the principles of PCM. In this month's technology tip, they have this DIY project to get various gate signals out of a ZX Spectrum home computer for triggering up to 8 analog synth voices for creating drum patterns. I like this "you can't buy it, so build it yourself" approach. Although I didn't build this specific one, I made some of their later DIY projects like an active DI box and a reamping box. I still use those in my studio. The Yamaha D1500 is a digital delay. It's mono, so for some fancy ping-pong delay effects you would need two of these and a mixing desk. But this unit has one interesting feature. It has a control voltage input for the modulation. Just use an external modulation source from a modular synthesizer or so for some fancy flange and chorus effects. The Yamaha CX-5M got featured in last month's video of this series, so this month I will only briefly show you a piece of software they test here in this issue. The FM Music Composer. This MIDI to CV interface from Yellinghaus could be of some interest again today. Then it was there to bridge from the new digital MIDI connection to older analog gear that was still in use in hybrid keyboard systems. Now that modular synths and other analog units are used again, this could come handy. The KORG KMS30 in comparison is for syncing DIN-synced sequences to MIDI sequences and/or tape. I never had one, but I would have used it for syncing the following unit to MIDI. Here on the back cover it is. The KORG DDM110 has been a cheap drum computer that aimed at the home recording market. I was lucky to get this and its sister machine, the DDM220, for a reasonable price and, as you can see, in the original packaging. They only differ in the sounds. The 110 is the drummer and the 220 the percussionist. Let's unpack this and connect it so we can hear some sounds. Super drums. We get the manual, and this is the even more interesting bit, the general catalog from the day. Comes with a power supply. This is not original. These are not original. They still use styrofoam for packaging. And I'm not sure if this bag actually is supposed to be yellow. The KORG DDM110. KORG's first digital drum machine. It's a pretty small device and it easily fits on this desk, even with its sister model, side by side. Compared to the Lin models or even an RX-5, it's really tiny. Let's check the back for connections. Nothing there. All connections are done on the sides. From left to right, it's the connector for a regular 9V DC power supply and the power switch. It can run off batteries, and you need to put batteries in to keep all your valuable drum grooves retained after switching off. Next to it are two connectors for backing up the memory of this machine on a cassette player when you need to free up the limited internal memory space. Nowadays you could use a computer for that, of course. This here on the right looks like it's a MIDI port, but this is called DIN-sync because of its connector. It could be used to synchronize this machine to the DDM220, its analog ancestor the KPR77, or other gear that sports this connection. The switch is for slave or master mode. On the other side, we have some audio outputs. One for a regular headset and two jack connectors for left and right audio. Further to the right you can connect a start-stop foot switch, and there is a so-called trigger out. This is an interesting one, because whenever you program a clap into a pattern, a trigger impulse is sent out of this one and could be used with whatever external gear to trigger an external sound. If you plug a cable into this, the claps will be muted. Let's connect some audio leads. And power on. This machine contains 9 samples of basic instruments, and here they are. Those are the worst claps I ever heard from any digital drum machine. Sounds are pretty unspectacular and you can't alter them at all, not even the volume balance. Just the metronome and the hi-hat and cymbal sounds have their own individual volume pot. You might have heard already there are only 3 positions for the panorama, left, middle and right, nothing in between. Due to not having individual outs, only these two stereo outs, it's not possible to properly mix the sounds afterwards, but later I will try to beef them up a bit using modern mixing tools. You can still do something to them. Patterns can be programmed in real time or step by step, as usual, and those can be chained up to one of the 6 possible songs. Most buttons have multiple functions depending on the mode you're in, so let me show you how this works. For programming a pattern, you have to switch to record mode. You should initial the pattern first, which is pattern erase here. Hit 0, enter. You heard the click. Now this pattern is empty. Nothing to hear. For predetermining the time signature, you have to hit one of these keys, and then this shows how much steps you actually have in the pattern. So if I want to have 4/4 with a 16th of resolution, just hit that one, number flashes, there we go. So if we play this pattern now, it's just 1 bar, 16 steps. The accent only works for all instruments at once, so you can put it on some steps of the pattern and it will raise the volume of any sound that's on that step. That's why I did the offbeat for the hi-hat. Otherwise it would add some volume or some dynamics to the snares and the other sounds as well. Well, let's do a longer pattern. So I'm going to initialize this one. So if you want more steps, which would be 32, you have to initialize the pattern to this 4/4 and 32th. There you go. With this we would get 32 steps. So let's program something. We'll start in real time. You get no info about what this tempo actually is. You just have a knob for the coarse tempo, and then for some fine tuning you can use the second one. Now let's see what we can actually do with those sounds, other than just listening to them plainly. So here is what I did. I recorded the DDM110's patterns into my favorite DAW, fitted the timeline, made a proper loop, so it'll go round and round while I will show you some examples. I bet your creativity and imagination will just start there and come up with much more sophisticated things to pimp the rather dull sounds of the DDM110 machine. Like I said, it's not possible to get the individual sounds out of this drum computer while it's playing patterns, but that's not so different to working with full audio loops. Okay, I know about modern demixing software, but this is about what we would have done in the day. Just not with software like I show it here, it would have been done all with hardware. I try to deal with it like you would with any live recording of some real drums. In the day when the DDM110 got released, 4-track recordings on cassette tape were common, and when you recorded live played stereo drums, you had to suffice with only the remaining 2 leftover tracks for the rest of the instruments and vocals. Or you just synchronize all your sequenced MIDI gear with set tape and would only lose 1 track for the timecode, leaving you with 3 mono tracks. If you would like to see a video about how that has been done in the 80s with gear from then, feel free to leave a comment below. But I digress. Back to the KORG DDM110. Let's hear something. This is how it sounds like straight from the machine. I didn't add any effects or equalizer yet, and I doubled the pattern track so we could compare the raw sounds with the pimped tracks if we need to. The first thing that helps already a lot is adding some reverb, without actually needing that much. Another thing that annoys me a lot with the DDM110 is this wide static stereo panorama. Sounds are only hard left, hard right or in the middle. Like the hi-hat you hear is hard right. But Cubase and Nuendo have this combined panner, so you can narrow the stereo width. There you go. I prepared some track presets for this to show you different results. These are altered from presets which come with Cubase or Nuendo, but you should find similar presets in your DAW of choice. Or you copy what you see here. And you're not forced to use software at all. Just grab any hardware effects you can get your hands on. There's no limit to your imagination. Let's see something I just used to better some sounds. There's some tape saturation going on. The equalizer is raising the high end a bit. The compressor. And an envelope shaper, adding some kick to this. But you can do some sound design as well. Ping pong delay is adding some nice extra grooves, and the flanger is doing its thing. What else? Using an amp simulator for adding some distortion. But nobody forces you to use presets that are actually made for drums. Let's see, what is fat power chords? That's for guitars. Another patch with amp simulation, or something that's made for vocals. Oh yeah, like that. The mod machine gives it a pretty funny groove. Or something for an organ. All of this is originally coming from this. It's really fun to work with old gear that has limitations and keeps you on your toes for still achieving what you want. And sometimes it will nudge you completely in a different direction you never thought of. Especially in those moments when you're tired of just pushing a mouse. Okay, I gotta confess that the DDMs are not necessarily the first machines I would pull out of the shelves for programming a beat, but once in a while they are fun in being so basic. Next month's video of this series will feature another early digital drum computer classic with a lot more features and far better sounds. After that, we will finally come to the first real synthesizer from my collection that got tested in the Keyboard Magazin. Thanks for watching and for your support. It's much appreciated. Please like, subscribe and ring the bell to get informed as soon as I publish more interesting videos for you. See you again soon on All About Keys.